Okay. Chapter 6, word identification. As she falls and breaks her leg. So we kind of talked about sounds and how you need to have some sound analysis. I think the problem with that is for some teachers, hey, come on in.
I didn't know you were here. I found the janitor, so I was gonna go ask, hi, have you seen Mrs. Crabtree teaching any college kids? And I heard you.
It's okay. It's okay, it's okay. We're just getting started. And we're not going to do the Watsons because we're so small. We'll just wait and pick it back up. Thankfully, it's not going to be a big deal, a deal breaker if we don't. Okay, so what goes on? Oh, I might need to turn it on. Word identification is all about reading, print, and identifying words. What?
She's just
It's real close,
stealing
and
the
if they're
spotlight.
just,
That's how she
I
is.
just,
Yeah.
I think I fell staring straight at me.
You should just do that the whole time.
What?
Like a small child
For the other one.
smiling at the camera.
I'm just gonna be like,
hold up.
just like
Coming over here.
I'm gonna make sure I'm not in it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. Invisibility. I would shine it at that, but it just looks white from that distance. So, word identification. It's going to teach kids how to read, print, and identify words. Kids need to learn how to deal with unknown words quickly and by themselves. If the task is too laborious and slow, it will cause a loss of comprehension and enjoyment. Why does that make sense? Why, if it's slow, are they not going to know what they read? Why does that connect? What do you think?
If they read it slow or they hear it slow.
If they're trying to sound out or use a lot of sound clues to read something.
I feel like there'd be more focus on one thing. Then
Yes, exactly.
comprehend it.
If the task is all I can do is figure this out, I'm going to have no idea what I said at the end of that. Yeah, and I've watched that a lot, even with kids in high school. They get maybe so, if that's a weakness and they're so focused on just getting it right, they have no idea what they said. Also, in terms of what your brain can do, you have a finite amount of energy you bring to any task. So if you are using all your energy for just reading the stuff, you're going to have nothing left to think deeply about it or to think beyond what you just said. So, and some words are going to need you to use more of that energy to get to it than other words will. Look on page 151. There's a great example. Under activating your schema. So the two words are, read these words, the and frontimity. You know the first word? Well, yeah. Do you know the second word? I didn't. Did you guys know that word? Have you ever heard it? Because I was like, I don't think I've ever heard that one. Can you pronounce the next one? You can, because they call it parsing it. You're going to break it in pieces that make sense. You may not have it perfectly right, but you're going to be really close. And it's going to go back to putting the emphasis on the right place to be sure you sound just right. But, so, it could be the janitor. What helped you read the word? Now read the following sentence. When the car sped down the 4-lane frontimity, the police officer pulled the driver over for speeding. Even though you've never seen the word frontimity, now do you know what it means? Can you get there, do you think? Yeah, that's context clues, exactly. When you say we're using context clues to get to something we don't know, it's because all around it I've got some meaning. So I can narrow this down to pretty close. It's got to be a highway, it's got to be a road. 4-lane tells me that, right? So that's what context clues is, and sometimes we solve it that way. So, how do we need to learn to deal with things quickly? Word identification means putting a label on words that are encountered in print. It's also a comprehensive term that encompasses the use of multiple cues to identify unfamiliar words. Sometimes it's instantly and sometimes it requires analysis. We talked about like reading like a whale, like you're living down deep in the story and then you hit a word like frontimity and you have to come up and go, what do you think that means? I think I got it. Okay, back down. So talking about instantly, some unfamiliar words you can read pretty quickly. Some kids in their early stages, they might be reading like this. They're reading, they come to the word come, and they say, has me in it. Me. And so they're working really hard to see it, parse it, read it. And so some kids will see something they know and try to link that, and some will see, oh, I know that word, it looks like one I know. The kindergarten classroom we were just in, she had my as the top word, but she was getting them to try and buy and fly. So she was showing them, you've got a word you know, it sounds like this, don't make it too hard when you get to something like that. It's going to be like the word my. The problem with that is English is super contrary, isn't it? It doesn't fly by the rules very much. I'll show you some work in that area in a minute on a couple of videos. So sometimes you know it quickly, word identification. Sometimes you have to break it apart. If we had medical books in here and I said, okay, let's read this paragraph together, we'd be relying a lot on analysis of words. We'd be going like hydro, that's water. Okay, what's the next part? We would be trying to read it, and we would sound like those beginning first graders because we don't have a connection to that either. Ooh, just happened. Word recognition suggests a process that involves immediate identification. This means rapidly retrieving it from your lexical memory, and that's what it's called. Your like file cabinet of words is your lexical memory. Lexicon, those are all related to readability, reading. That's what it means. Usually the phrase sight word recognition is the term you hear the most in this type of reading. Sight words happen in a millisecond. Honestly, a flash. Your brain perceives that word in a flash. And it's truly a flash. It's shocking to you how fast you can do that if you're a seasoned reader. But in first grade, they can do it too pretty quickly if they know it. Parents are under the mistaken assumption that you should just stare at it until you get it. But really, you need to play some games and get it better before you go here and try to go pretty quickly. Okay, you're not going to fly through them the first time you do it with kids, but they need to get to the place where they see it and they're like, oh, it's mine, it's come, it's from, it's family. Word attack, word analysis, and decoding. Those are really close to the same. They're all the act of translating print into speech through the analysis of letter-sound relationships. So phonics is part of that. Officially known as mediated word identification because readers must devote conscious attention to unlocking the code. Doesn't matter. Don't ever try to remember mediated word identification. Phonics is a part of a word attack strategy. Kids that don't have phonics in school, and Springfield schools don't do a lot of phonics work with their lower elementary kids. I taught some 6th grade boys one summer at Greenwood Elementary. They had no idea how to break a word apart. They couldn't see parts. They weren't taught parts. So like the word floor, they didn't know FL made a sound together. They had no idea, 6th grade. So think how hard it is to have good word attack strategies if that's not a tool you have in your belt, because you're going to need some of that to be able to read. Identifying words is a process. Children learn to ID some words through visual clues, such as a distinctive feature. They use their developing knowledge of letter-sound relationships to identify words. This development includes those phases that may show up quickly in your text. They're not that important. Pre-alphabetic phases, that's kids recognizing McDonald's and Taco Bell. Partial alphabetic phase, they know dominant things. Full alphabetic stage, I know all this, but it's still going to be a process and consolidated. That's what I was talking about where I said we would see pieces and units, bigger pieces and units. What they're talking about, letter-sound relationship. Looking to see where all the markers have gone. I had some students that needed to learn by the shape and size of a word, and we did some things called Elkonian boxes, and they look like this. Short for M, long, and drop down for Y. That's an Elkonian. So they learn by the shape of the word. They learn that come has 4 squares that are the same size. So you've seen these in worksheets. where there was an empty spot and you had a shape. Have you seen those? Do you remember those way back in the day in your own work? Like there was a word you needed to fill in and you had a shape. So you knew it had to fit the shape. That's an Elkonian box, and that's one of those ways that you can identify by their distinctive graphic features. That's what that means. So, pre-alphabetic is the logographic or the visual cue phase. It begins when they can recognize some words at sight and some by just how they look. Environmental print. Partial alphabetic, when they have some sense of letters, they begin to detect letter sound. They'll say, that's like an M like in my name. Yes, it's an M like in your name. It's also like a monkey. It's like in monkey. They start to connect a little bit to something they know something about. This phase happens during kindergarten a lot and into first grade. Some kids are going to be delayed. If they come with less on their plate, they'll be more into first grade still figuring out all those connections. If they come with some preschool background and some work in that in preschool, they'll have a lot of that on their plate when they get to kindergarten. So this phase emerges when children's literacy development reaches the ability to match all the letters and sounds. They have enough knowledge to distinguish each sound in known words. And there's a Yop Singer, we'll probably look at it later, and you can pull it up on YouTube. The Yop Singer assessment is like you give them words and they have to stretch and say the sounds, or you give them the sounds and they have to put them together and make the word. So I can't remember which way it goes, but it's like if the word's bat, you say bat and they have to go b-at. So pulling out all the sounds. Or you say b-at and they have to push it together and make it into a word. Both those are phonemic things. If you don't see letters, it's sounds, it's phonetic. If you see letters, it's phonic. Phonic means you're manipulating letters. If you're manipulating sounds, where kids make sounds and they say that rhymes with that, and they're doing it all out loud, that's phonemic. There's just a difference. If there are no letters attached, it's phonemic work. Consolidated means the readers rely less on individual letter-sound relationships. Instead, they use their knowledge of familiar letter patterns to speed up the process. That's going back to her saying, if you know my, you can read all these other words. If you know, what's another good one? If you know look, you can read book and took and crook and cook and all these other words because it looks like something I know. So that's where you're relying on something you know. The problem with that is that words are so contrary. And I know you've probably seen skits about that where they're like, it's like this, but then wait, that doesn't fit the mold. You know, there's always an outlier that doesn't fit that will mess you up. In the consolidated phase, readers are able to segment the words into sound units known as onsets and rhymes. Onset and rhyme is the initial consonant sounds. It might be one or multiple, and then the rest is the rhyme. Onset rhyme. So it's like this: k-at, k-atch, or full or. Okay? Onset, maybe a blend, and then the rhyme is the rest. The rhyme are the vowel and consonants that follow. So elephant, no matter how big it is. Okay? The funny part of that, and just a side note, every syllable must have a vowel in it, or it will not be a syllable in the English language. There should be a vowel present in every syllable. Otherwise, it isn't. Traditional phonics include the analytic and synthetic approaches to teaching word recognition. It involves early, intensive, and systematic instruction designed to help master all letter sounds. This follows with the bottoms-up approach of teaching. And Cassidy's doing that every day in their classroom. Talk a little bit about what that looks like in your room.
We do the Johnny Can Spell cards every day.
I wish I brought some in here. I wonder if I have any anywhere. I don't.
Yeah, we have some up there if you want me to get them later.
Probably
but-
next door, don't you bet?
Oh yeah, I'm sure she has some next door.
We can look at them in a sec.
So every day it's just cards, and I think you talked about it last week, like with the letter, and then we have stickers on the top that show how many sounds each letter has. And then we also do the sign with it. So like,
Which is great for kids that need a link, an
Yes.
additional link.
and so which helps our nonverbal students because
Mhm.
they're still getting that A has 4 sounds, but instead they're doing A says at, A, instead of saying it. So we do that every day. That's just part of our circle time, is doing all of those letters in different orders and in different ways. And then because even our preschoolers, by the end of the year, we're starting to put sight words together because
They can start hearing the sounds.
yes, and
Yeah.
it's crazy to me how fast they pick it up, the sounds, because we can just hold up a letter or even hold up a sign and they know that that's B, and they'll say B says but, and they know it, and so we're able to start putting words together with them, and so it's cool to see that. So we do that every single day, and so it's pretty engraved in their
I
brain.
watched a child who's completely deaf who didn't hear sounds at all, ever. And he learned the visual phonics part, that he couldn't connect a mouth movement. He knew what his mouth needed to do. When he saw that sign, he knew what his mouth needed to do. He learned it. So he would say in his normal dialogue, learning to speak without being able to hear himself speak is hard. So instead of saying cat, he would say cat and leave off that final sound. And all the teacher had to do was, and isn't this, no, yes.
Yeah.
All the teacher had to do, she would say cat, and she would just do that, and he would say, oh, cat. Like,
Wow.
it was amazing how it added for him the
It's
sound he
incredible.
was missing, not being able to hear it, but to be able to communicate appropriately. It was a deaf mom who taught, who created this, and it kind of went back to what your mouth is doing. So this is a mimic of your mouth's going, your tongue's hitting the roof of your mouth, so that's why it's doing that. L. So, what's another one? So, learning to add that sound is another way of putting that phonic connection to a letter. I can make a sound, but I can now know what my mouth needs to even do, even if I can't hear a thing. Isn't that amazing?
Wow.
They're still going to have to communicate and talk and read.
Right.
So being able to help them do that. Analytic phonics is like whole to part. So that's when we do Little Miss Muffet sat on a tuffet. Let's divide, or let's find some words and break those apart. It says it relies heavily on workbooks and practice exercises, but it actually can go into whole good literature, and you can pull that apart as well. It doesn't have to rely on workbooks to be analytic. You can take something you know well, like a poem, and start to break it down and say, well, what sound do you hear in the front of? So you can do it that way too. Synthetic phonics is teaching sounds in isolation, followed by blending the sounds to form words. Those are, think about it, really, Cassidy, they are teaching sounds in isolation, and they are learning to blend them into words, if that makes sense. Sometimes they tell you things and you're like, it's all kind of part of the same ball. Really? Does it really matter? When you become a teacher, then nobody's going to use the word synthetic, phonics delivery to you, ever. Ever. That's okay. The more contemporary approach doesn't rely on skill and drill activities and rules and worksheets as much. The instruction is more of a top-down approach and is rooted in more meaningful activities, not separate instruction. So what we've tried to do this year is actually blend the two. We're doing some isolated skill and drill, kids that have nothing. We bring them those pieces, but we're marrying it into real literature, real poetry, and we're going and finding them. So we're doing a little bit of a marriage of both. Analogy-based phonics teaches children to use their knowledge of letters representing onsets of rhymes in words they already know how to pronounce to read other words. We just talked about that. Embedded phonics instruction is associated with holistic, meaning-centered teaching. They learn phonics in stories that make sense. So, we learn consonant-based strategies, we learn letter actions, favorite foods, consonant substitution. Those are all things that are possible. Your book will speak about many of them. Digraph and blend associations. There are all kind of cube words. Have you seen where they link cubes to blend sounds? They have those linking cubes and they blend sounds. Consonant substitution would be, let's think of words that rhyme with top, And they're like mop and pop, and that's consonant substitution. Or being tricky, can you change gave to gate? And how would you do that? What letter would leave? What letter would come? That's harder to think about for little kids, but. So, analogic-based strategies. The idea is to compare the patterns to known words, realizing the similarities in onsets and rhymes. If you know look, you can read cook and took and shook. There are 38 more common phonograms compiled by Fry, who's one of the phonics gurus. And we know there are many, many more. Many, many more than that. Fry came up with 38. We have letters in the alphabet, single letters only. We have 41 sounds in the single 26. And that's not counting all the blends. There's tons of 2-letter and 3-letter blends too. But I will tell you, like KN for silent, K on the front, those words are so random and rare in most reading and writing opportunities that really you should just stop and talk about it in that moment and not teach all those rules. It happens so rarely. I don't know that it's worth the time to like teach all the WR. Well, the W doesn't talk, but the R does. Like in wrong, you don't hear the W. It just shows up here so rarely. You just speak about it when it happens. It's really brighter to do it right in the moment than to try to teach all those and like see if they know them all. So spelling-based strategies, they learn through word banks, word walls, word sorting activities. We have books called All Sorts of Sorts, and they may sort OW words into which ones say ow, which ones say oh. That's a higher level one because you can't tell by looking. You have to read it to know, does it say snow or snow? Which one's a real word? So that's a higher level. Some of them in word sorting, it may be AT words. Well, you don't have to be able to read it all to be able to do that really well. That's the problem with those. Lots of kids can sort and write word wall words. I was in a 3rd grade class and they had to pull a word out of a little basket and they had magnetic letters and they were building them. And we were observing in a 3rd grade classroom. And they said, how did you come up with the words you're building? He said, oh, we just pull one out of the basket. I said, okay. What word are you building? He goes, I don't know. And I thought, what's the value here? Where's the value in this? Because if you don't know what you just did, if you can't read it or use it in your reading or your writing, it's a waste of time. So unless you can tie it to something pertinent, it's waste of energy. And why in the world would you put any kid through something that's not going to benefit them in their reading and writing? So if you could determine the purpose, for instance, one of the best ways to do some word sorting might be around a specific topic. Maybe you build vocabulary around weather patterns that we're studying. Let's say we talk about spring weather and the patterns, and then we start thinking of words that sound like or look like those words, and we build off those, and then we sort. Then that makes more sense. It's organic, it makes sense, and they've used some of those words. We can get to new ones because we can read cloud. I can probably read proud. So we can think of words that might connect to something we're doing, if that makes more sense. Anything random that doesn't seem to be relevant is going to have very little use to a child. And to you too, really. Understanding the power of context clues, another important way. He stood with his arms akimbo, studying the unyielding lock. Akimbo was always one that blew my mind as a junior high kid. I'm like, I don't know what that looks like. I could not get a picture of that word in my head. So that goes back to the word we just read. In isolation, we had no idea. We got context clue. We know he's standing with his arms in a funny way, right? We know. Cross-checking involves rereading a sentence or two to cross-check or confirm, reject, or modify your original attempt. This strategy takes very little instruction to teach and works very well when used to problem solve. So going back to running records, they get to a word they don't know. They're using some sort of analysis to try to get to it. They might try sounds. If it doesn't work for them, they might try to reread and think what makes sense, and they may get really close. So that's what they're talking about. That's another way to learn word identification, just like we talked about context clues. Another way is to get there by using the meaning of the sentence. So you're not spending all your minutes just sounding out. Sounding out works 67% of the time in the English language. it's not going to be your number one prompt. It's an F grade, really. Because it's so contrary. You can't get there, you cannot get there all day long if you're going to sound out come with sound analysis. You will not be right. You will not get there with the number word one. You will not be right. There are just so many words that fall into that category. Students learned ID words by breaking them to useful units. So, prefixes, suffixes, and root words. You understand what those are. I'm sorry, that page number I'm sure is wrong because that would have been from chapter 7 in the previous, and I need to look. But they talk about prefixes and suffixes. You know what prefixes are. Bi-monthly, what's another good one? So prefixes, suffixes fall into ly, ing, ed, and they get bigger than that, or full. Let's talk about compound words. A compound word is only truly a compound. I haven't told you this, have I? Okay, good. The compound word is only truly a compound if the first word relates to the second word. A box where you put the mail is a mailbox. It's a compound word, right? Okay. Only if this one relates to this one directly. It's a cake shaped like a cup. It's a cupcake. It relates. So you can never do this because I've taught you better now. Does this word relate directly to this word? Is it butter that flies? No, it's not a compound word. It may be two words put together, but it is not a compound word unless it relates to the other. Didn't know that, right? So there are some out there, and there are many teachers that will tell children that's a compound word. It isn't. Big pet peeve of mine. It isn't unless the first word and the second word have a relationship. Only then is it compound. So we can think of tons of those. Butterfly's not one of them. I was trying to think of another good example. Sometimes there are just strange words. We identify this creature as a butterfly. Don't know how it got its name. Yeah, it flies, but it's not butter. So I don't know. I don't know how it got its name. Rapid recognition, sight word vocabulary, and learning high frequency words falls into this category. This is necessary to become a proficient reader as it frees up the brain for more decoding. Sight word learning can be done in many different ways. They're called function words. I'm going to show you something if I can pull it up. Let's see if I can. It's a great tool for teaching sight words. It's called Super Speedy 100. And if you have 100 sight words under your belt, you're going to be pretty much okay.
Like my daughter is brought from like Fry's 100 word list. We have
It's
like
different.
the kindergarten list or the first grade list or something like that. Not anything that I don't think that they actually do, but just something that we can use to go over if you choose to do that.
Right. Okay. It looks like this. Super Speed. I was wrong. Super Speed 100. It's by the whole brain guru Chris Biffle. So you can see how easily it's got a little front loading here of what you do. You set the timer for a minute, I believe, with a child. Super Speed 100. How to play it. First, decide what word you want your students to begin with. Below are the 100 words in the Super Speed 100. It's recommended that kindergartners begin with the word with the word the. If you, I know I'm like, what's that word one? The. If you want your students to begin with up, the word, you choose. So there are all the words that it's incorporating, but here's how it looks. It's really cool because everyone can be in a different place, working at their own pace with a partner, and they're still helping each other. So it looks like this, level 1, the. They just read the. They go for 1 minute till they hit a place where they get stuck. The, two, the, two, the, two, the, two, two. See how it's working? So it's increasing by one word at each level. So you have 1 minute to see how far you go, and you're just racing yourself. So tomorrow you see if you can go farther than that. Sorry, I hit the sidebar. Your neighbor may be in a whole different place to start. He may have gotten farther along, but you can still time each other and encourage each other to be better than yesterday. All you have to do is put a pencil mark where you landed, and the next day see if you can go farther than that. So it's going to take you, see how it's just slowly ratcheting up? It's a great way to incorporate, okay, how you can get better. His, that. It's throwing in the new ones in blue, you can see. But we copied these for first graders, and they loved working together to see if they could beat themselves. They're working to just better themselves. In Eureka Math, we have, they do these speedy exercises, and they're only looking to beat themselves. They understand they're not trying to beat anybody else but themselves. This works in the same way. So this is a great way to improve sight word reading in a fun sort of game way. And really, 1 minute. Let's go. 1 minute. We're not going to spend a ton of time on it. You might try it twice in one run and then be like, we're done. We don't have to do that anymore. And it's so simple at the beginning that a lot of confidence happens because you've done that. So that is one great way of incorporating. You can get really fast, really quickly by practicing with some super simple words and getting slightly harder every time. Oh, that's the end of it. Yay, right? You're like, really? Tim Rosinski is mentioned at the bottom. He's still one of the biggest gurus at Kent State. He does lots of work with word identification and understanding that. He's at the bottom of the beginning of the chapter. I gave you some video links, and I'm going to show you a couple of those because it's still super early, thankfully. We're going to get out of here quickly anyway. Those video links are in your whole thing, so you'll be able to see them. But here's the cool part. The reason I'm showing those tonight is this is the first time since we met that you will actually be able to hear things. Because we can never hear anything we're doing on campus.
Round. Say the first part. C-R. You ready? Lauren does this real well. Lauren, pick one of your pictures. That's a crib.
No.
Say the sound. And the letters. Excellent. Jake.
She's added letters, so it's not phonemic alone, is it? Because there's a letter connection to it. This is Jan Richardson, the book that was the optional book. This is her doing that. Dr. Jan Richardson. Don't you love how their tools are so small and right together? But she's got pictures
Excellent.
of the two onset blends.
And the sound. Full. Which one says full? Good job. Jake.
She's going so fast I can't see what the pictures are. Oh, clip. You hear him pulling it apart slowly.
I love when Jake went
Clip.
ooh. Excellent. Who's out? Excellent. And the last one. Wow. Good job.
So at the upper levels of reading, like mid first grade, it's going to look more like that than it would be for some of the slower things. This is also a higher level.
Thinking about how you add an ending to a word that has a short vowel. I want you to put the word clap over here. Clap. And this was that thing I noticed on the word study inventory that was hard for them. Now watch me. When I make it say clapped, look at here, clap, and I'm going to add an ED, but I have to double the P before I add the ED. So when you add an ending,
You know why you have to
clap,
add an
and
extra
it's a short
consonant?
vowel, you need to double the P.
She's telling you, but why? The reason is if any letter has only one consonant, any vowel has only one consonant between two vowels, the first one will be a long sound. So if I didn't double clap if I didn't double the P, it would be claped. Because it would become long. Because there would only be one consonant between two vowels. Make sense? So sitting, we have to add two T's because the two I's, the first, it would say sighting. And it does say sighting. So that's the reason you double. It would change the sound of it if you did it.
Whoops, you're missing something there.
So they're learning to double. She's
If you
using
don't have an ending, you're gonna put it over under clap. If you have an
a
ending,
T-chart
just-
slipped into a sheet protector makes a great whiteboard for quick work.
Look at here, Michelle.
Let's see if she's gonna do some more examples for
Ready?
them.
Snap.
Yeah.
You're gonna put snap.
At this level, they should be able to write that independently without her modeling.
The lens, very good. And now, oh good, I'm glad you fixed that. You're gonna make it say snapped. You're gonna add an ending, snapped. Over here, sweetheart.
Whole lot of erasing going on in there.
Snap, snapped. Very nice job.
We really can't see.
Wow.
There we go.
Ah, you're right, it's not right. Whoops, we got to put that. One letter, read it. Good job. And your ending though is not gonna be a T, what's it gonna be? E-D.
That's so hard for kids. They want to say
Slip.
T. It sounds like a T.
This little bit, you forgot to put snap. You need to leave snap. You don't have to erase it. Yeah. Now write slip.
The vowels getting them.
Slipping.
Ooh.
Slipping.
She's shifting gears.
Remember when you add an ending, you need to do something to that consonant.
Once you know, okay, so there's that. So there are others there to look at. Trying to get all this out. Okay. So, digraphs, okay. I gave you a set of phonic rules.